The lenses are here. I'm Dave, and there's John. And here, play.
Welcome to Retired Time Productions.
Yeah. So John's putting an emergency beeper onto this 230 SI, so when the battery gets low, it'll go beep, beep, beep. He's working on that. Mike just got a Hoobsan X4 FPV, and it's right here. And he's been flying that around, and it looks pretty good. So what I'm working on over here is putting the firmware and configuring my mini PixHawk, and that's what really this movie is going to be about, is using the mission planner to configure the mini PixHawk. First time setup here, I'm going to be loading the 3.3 firmware, which is the latest stable firmware right now. So I have connected the USB cable to the PixHawk, to the mini PixHawk, and to the USB port on the computer. And now we're just going to go ahead and load the firmware. Now we don't need to hit the connect button except to test it. So we might want to test it first, make sure it works, and then disconnect. So I'm just going to connect. Alright, we're going to connect. Here we go. Okay, it's done. And if I move the quadcopter, you can see that it is connected and responding. Okay, now to load the firmware though, we have to disconnect. I just wanted to make sure the USB was working, so now I'm going to disconnect. Alright, now we can go and load the firmware. So we're going to go to initial setup right here, and then it gets the list, I guess from the website, and we want to choose the APM Copter 3.3, the quad type right here, which is the way I got mine set up. So we'll click that. Are you sure you want to upload it? And you just say yes, and it'll start to upload from the internet. Now you get this little message that the hardware is unsupported. That's because it's a little bit different than the PixHawk. It's got an invalid cert, but that's alright. Just click OK. Alright, first thing it does is erase, then it loads the firmware. And keep in mind that I haven't pressed the connect button. It has to be unconnected here. The cable is on, the USB cable is on, but this isn't connected. Okay, so the firmware is going on. And then it says, please wait for the musical tones. And I assume these refer to the tones on the quadcopter. But there's no beeper, and the motors are not, there's no power to the motors. I don't think I'm going to hear any musical tones. So I just wait a little bit to make sure that the firmware is really done. And so I believe it is done, so I'm going to click OK. So if we go back to the flight data window now, let's go back over here, and then we'll just do a connect. Alright, now you'll see we're getting some errors here, and I usually get some errors after I load firmware because we haven't gone through the initial setup or the configuration. So that's what we need to do next. And to start with, we can go to initial setup right here, and it says you cannot load new firmware naturally because we're still on the firmware screen and we're so we can't load firmware when we're connected. That's all that means. But we're not loading firmware. We all did that. Well, now we can use the wizard to go through and configure everything, but I'm just going to go to mandatory hardware right here, and let's just go through that. So here's the frame type, and this is the right one to be checked. You really don't have to do anything like load parameters or anything here because we don't have any of these anyway. So that always just defaults to that 3D arrow underscore M. I don't do anything with that. I just leave it the way it is. So the frame type is selected correctly. Okay, let's go to the accelerometer calibration, and we'll see what happens there. Let's just do the level one right now, calibrate level. And so that says completed. So supposedly that's completed. And then this one is where you move it around. And I think I'm going to wait to do that for when we use our telemetry radios rather than the USB cable, because the USB cable gets in the way when I'm trying to move the quad around. Same thing with the compass. But you can make sure the compass is enabled, auto detect is on, and I usually just leave it in manual here. Rotation none is fine. That's normal. Then you have your radio calibration, and you can just turn your radio on. Of course, this requires that you have a receiver on your quad, and everything is set up with the receiver. Okay, radio is on, and we can do calibration. So down here, this is something new with 3.3 that I hadn't seen before, but it's bind DSM2, DSMX, or DSM8. Well, I've already bound mine because mine's an FR Sky, so it's not, I'm not going to be doing this. It's an FR Sky receiver with a Taranis radio, so I'm not going to be doing that. Now, if I just do the calibration, calibrate radio here, ensure your transmitter and receiver is powered and connected. Ensure your motors do not have power, and they don't. So, just do that, click OK. Move all the RC sticks and switches to their extreme positions so the red bars hit the limits. So that's what I'm doing. I'm moving my rudder and throttle stick around, and you can see it's hitting those maximum limits there. Also, make sure your trims are centered and your throttle trim is all the way down. Other trims are centered when you're doing this. Okay, that's that. Now I'm going to do the aileron and elevator stick. Just running that around. Okay, now I can flip what other switches. Here's one switch I'm using, channel 5. That's my mode switch, and that's my sub mode switch on the. So those two switches are on the same channel 5. I've got an OSD switch. I've got a return to launch. This is return to launch right here. And I think that's all the switches I have. So that's done. I'll just click done. And then everything's back to normal. Okay, and there's my values. So that's just a radio calibration. Flight modes, you can go in here and using the flight mode switch, which was on channel 5. So in the off position or low position, I've got stabilize mode, and you can pick whatever you want in here for your modes. I won't get into that because that's like a whole nother video. And then there's fail-safe. So fail-safe is right here. Ensure your props are not on, of course. And you can do this. Also in here you can set your battery alarm. I usually set mine to just land when I'm first practicing, because I've had it on return to home and that can cause problems. The thing can fly away on you if you don't have a good GPS fix and you haven't set your home position, stuff like that, so you can run into trouble. So I just put it on land, and under radio enable always land, and I have this unchecked, don't even want that. And this is your failsafe PWM right here, and I've got it on 970. So like if I turn the radio off, you'll see everything stop right there, and these are the values. I'll turn it back on. So if I was to lose power, I want to make sure that this value was above the value I had when I turned the power off. And also, you can look at the if you look at the throttle right here, you can see the minimum value is 982, and when the radio goes into fail-safe, like when it's off, it goes to 874. So 874 is definitely below 970, so that should be all right. So we can just leave that like it is. So everything like it is right now is how I would put it. Okay. Okay, now let's just go to optional hardware here for a second, and we're going to look at some things under here. First one is the battery monitor. just check to make sure the capacity of your battery is set here, and you can type that in. I'm going to leave it at 4,000. And you should have a power module. And I'm choosing PixHawk right here. And then for the sensor, I'm going to use the 3DR power module. And then I've got voltage and current set that I'm going to be measuring. And I'm not going to have the low battery alert on. That's fine, and I don't really do anything with this, so that's that. And when you get this far, and if you've done some things, what you can do is go to configuration and tuning right here, go to full parameter list, and if you've changed anything under the full parameters, it will show up under here is marked in green. For example, under the compass, if you're using an external compass like I am, then there's a couple parameters here you can check. There's a compass external, should be a 1. Configure compass so it is attached externally. This auto detect for the PX4 and and PixHawk. So anyway, make sure that's a 1, and then there's another setting down here under compass use. It says enable or disable the use of the compass instead of the GPS. So this is using compass instead of the GPS. That might want to be a 1. Also, this should be a 0. So the primary compass, and this is kind of important if you're using external compass, 0 is for external. If that's a 1, you're using the internal. So make sure that's a 0. So if you've changed any of these things, then you'd want to write it. And what you can do is just go here and write the params to make sure they're getting out there to your quad. And then you can save the file too right here. You can save it to your computer as a backup and just name it something like, we'll just call this test. Alright, and then you can just save it. And there's a note here you can fill in if you want. I'll just leave it default. So that's that. Alright, back to initial setup right here. And we're going to go to the 3DR radios. Now right now I don't have the 3DR radio plugged in, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and plug in the ground radio into my USB port on my laptop. I'm going to plug in the telemetry radio. Now I've got to power up the quad from its own battery. The quad may not come on with everything perfect, so you may have an arrow light, like a flashing yellow arrow light. But that's okay as long as the telemetry radios are going. Okay, now let's go ahead and connect the telemetry radios, and we do that by coming down here, and usually it's on COM port 6 for me, but you can look in your device manager and find it, the COM port. Okay, and it's got to be on 57.6 for it to connect, unlike the other one. See, when you're on the USB cable, it's the higher one, but you can also use auto. Yeah, it's 115200 when you're on the USB port. But for the telemetry radio, it's always 57.6. Okay, let's go ahead and connect. Alright, we're done. We're going to load some parameters though. These are the parameters that it's getting from the quad. So if your radios are working right, then you should be able to load the settings. I have to be disconnected to load the settings. Let's try that. See what happens. There we go. So that was the trick. I should have disconnected this button up here and let the radios load their settings. So there's all the settings. And if that doesn't work for you, I've got another video on how to get your telemetry radios to communicate. And you just let me know in the comments and I'll give you the link. All the parameters are loaded, everything's fine. So now that the 3DR radios are communicating, let's go ahead and go back to the mandatory hardware. And this is under initial setup right here, mandatory hardware. And let's go back to the accelerometer calibration. Let's just see if we can do the level again through the telemetry radios. And that's complete. Now let's just see if we can do the 3-axis calibration. It says place the vehicle level and press any key. Okay, so we'll do that. I'll hit enter. Okay, now place it on its left side. Okay, I've got it on its left side. I'm hitting enter again. Place it on the right side. Hitting enter again. Place it nose down. Alright, got the quadcopter nose down. Now place it nose up. I got it nose up, hitting enter. Now place it on its back. So I got it upside down. Hit enter. And the calibration was successful. So that was done through the telemetry radios, and I didn't have that cable hanging on there. The USB cables, that made it easier. So now let's do the compass calibration. That's right here. And we've already got all the settings. We talked about those earlier. Now let's just do the live calibration. It says click OK and move the autopilot around all the axes. Okay. Now I've got external compass, which is combined with the GPS. So I've got two windows here. My understanding is this is the external and this is the internal. And what we're going to try to do is move it around all the axes. So first thing I'm going to do is rotate it. I'm holding it on the sides, and I'm going to rotate it around holding the sides. And you can see it drawing a circle. So it's going end over end right now. So it's drawing a circle. Alright. Now I'm going to turn it 90 degrees and go end over end holding the rear and the front. And that's going to draw another circle. And the idea is to hit all those white dots there, if you can do it. All the white dots in the left window. Okay. It looks like I got all those dots pretty good there. It's looking good. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is start with it facing, it's flat and facing sort of north, and I'm just going to rotate it flat around on a 360 like this. And you can see it drawing a circle at the top there, a little circle. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it upside down. It's still flat, but it's upside down. I'm going to rotate it flat, and it should draw a circle at the bottom. And I think you can see that. Okay, it just found all of the points. So it automatically detected that I was done. And now I'm just going to click OK. And OK again. And we're done. Okay, now that we've got pretty much everything done we want to do, let's just go back to configuration and tuning right here. And go to full parameter list, and let's just look down through here and see if anything has changed. Looks like everything's already been written to the quad, but I'll just go ahead and write params again anyway, because there wasn't anything highlighted. Okay, so I wrote the params. Now let's just go ahead and save the param file to the computer, and let's see. So I'm going to go with calling this we'll call this stable 3.3 params. I did have 3.2.1, but I've gone to 3.3. So we'll call this stable 3.3 params. That's the stable firmware, and these are the parameters that I've done for it. So I'm going to go ahead and save those. And again, you can put something in the note if you want. I just usually leave it default. Alright, so we've got everything in there for now. Now that we've loaded the 3.3 firmware, we can now search for the new auto tune features. So I'm going to put auto tune in here and go ahead and search. And there's the 3 new features we didn't have in 3.2.1. So now we can actually select what part of the auto tune we want to do. Like we can do just roll, or we can do just pitch, or we can do just yaw. And yaw is new, they didn't have that before. And we can do roll and pitch or roll and yaw. So this saves the battery life. If your battery won't make it through the whole thing, you can just do 1 of them or 2 of them, so that makes it a lot easier. So I just took it out and flew it with the new 3.3 firmware, and it flew okay, but it needs some tuning, so the next stage will be doing the auto tune.
Doesn't stick above 0 to do it.
Oh, you do?
Or at 0 to do that. Above 0 makes it go up, below 0 makes it go down. But it probably isn't really help do home. Well, if you have the stick in the center, well, it doesn't matter where the stick is, but you need an altitude hole. So if you're below the center, it'll actually go down and up. So if you're above the center, it'll go up and up.